that they are able to survive. This mainly comes from the fact that if you are an early stage startup and your deal flow is somehow hindered or blocked by the cancellation of events or something like that, it's extremely difficult to actually get new funding from alternative source. So the amount of financial resources is very limited for a number of studios, and most of the studios, more than half of the studios, have pass runway less than 1 year ahead of themselves. And when suddenly all events are cancelled, this is of course going to be a major. So, and this was also clearly having impact on negotiation with investors, other partners, or publishers. 12% were reporting seriously bad effects immediately. 40% were reporting delays. Luckily, there were 2%.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt. There was some problems with us getting live. So could you start over? There has been like 10 minutes going, but I can extend your room session a bit.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Nobody has hear anything, so.
Okay.
You can introduce yourself again. And
does it work now?
For technical issues, it happens. This was the first one, so for us. And hey, enjoy the presentation. Here's Jari-Pekka Kaleva from EGDF.
Okay, Santeri, this works now, I suppose. So I assume that you are now able to hear my voice, and Santeri will tell me if that's not the case. So let's start from the beginning. So I'm Jari-Pekka Kaleva from the European Games Developer Federation, where I work as a CEO. And EGDF is a trade association uniting 18 national trade associations on the European level. Those trade associations represent more than 2,000 game developer studios that employ over 25,000 people. And of course, both the trade associations and those studios have faced significant challenges. So, what happened? When the virus hits the fan and you have only 2 months notice to get ready. And even the first notice is something that you most likely didn't see, because on the 31st of December 2019, there was a tiny headline in Chinese in Hubei Daily Online telling that Wuhan detects pneumonia of unknown cause. And 58 days later, GDC was cancelled. So everything happened extremely quickly, and it just was very, very strange times for everyone, as you remember. So in February, March 2020, the associations and studios, in the beginning of the month, they were focusing on introducing quarantines for employees returning from abroad or employees with COVID-19 symptoms. Or they were introducing preventive actions for employees, like wearing a face mask when they are working at the workplace, or cleaning your hands, washing your hands every day when you come to work or going for lunch. Of course, at that point, also a number of studios started to cancel their trade missions and other events, leading, of course, these events themselves being cancelled, and also association cancelling the trade missions. And something that most likely wasn't outside, but a number of studios and associations started immediate action on updating their crisis communication plans, getting ready for how to tell bad news if they are going to face some losses and deaths of the people working for the industry. And unfortunately, these plans were needed in a number of countries because we have lost a number of the people working for the industry, and even more people have lost their loved ones in Europe at the moment. And of course, on association side, we are expressing our warm sympathy for everyone who have lost their loved ones or their colleagues. And it has been really, really dark and difficult times for everyone. That itself has been the most critical, most dark, and most impactful outcome of the COVID-19 outbreak for the European industry. But also on the business side, already in February, studios and associations were starting to prepare themselves for delays and financial losses. And unfortunately, that was also something that was work done in the right time because that kind of situations were coming ahead. And at the end of the month, studios moved to full remote working mode. This itself for the games industry wasn't that big challenge as a number of other industries or fields in our societies, but still, like number of studios were really struggling to build up the infrastructure, getting the tools, redevelop their ways of working, and the CTOs were working extremely hard to actually integrate the new tools to the workflow. And that all was causing some delays at that point. But in the end, now we can finally say that games industry is fully digitally remote working industry. So, how to survive a virus? What has happened during the outbreak? Let's start from European games developer studios. March 2020, we did this kind of small survey. We got replies from European level from 220 game developer studios. This is, of course, only a small fraction of the all 5,000 game developer studios in Europe at the moment. So this gives a rough idea what kind of impact the studios have faced and gives you kind of indication of the challenges the game developers are facing in Europe at the moment. But even from these numbers, it's clear that 43% of the studios are reporting that the situation is worse than usual already in March. So about a half. For about a half, 13% were curiously saying that their business is actually doing better than usual. And 38% didn't feel any kind of effect at that point. And this is clearly reflected to the second question about impact on business practices. The same 37-38% reported that there is no change. There were still like 4% of studios reporting that they need to outsource some of their work, and 12% were still looking for more workforce. Matching about that 13% of studios doing better than usual. But 12% of the studios were telling that they could do some subcontracting to survive. 15% were reporting that they are facing extreme uncertainty and delays in projects and deals. And 20% were afraid of shutting down their business completely, or at least they're starting their operation to downscale their business. In practice, from the data, we can see that 43% of studios are the stable ones, having a runway more than 1 year. But the majority of the developer studios have a runway for about a year or less than a year. 17% of the studios have only a runway for 1 to 3 months. And of course, if used companies in this kind of situation, there is immediately significant challenges for your business if you are going to face any kind of blocks or obstacles in your deal flow. And international business events, games industry events, and their cancellation had a major impact on these studios, struggling with their runway already on that point. The impact on negotiations with investors, it was very visible and clear as well. 12% reported that there was a serious bad effect immediately, and 40% were reporting delays in deals and projects and missed opportunities. So if your runway is 1 to 3 months, or 6 months, or less than a year, and if there is delays in the deals and projects or miss any opportunities, that's a big problem, of course. 2% were reporting actually that there was a positive impact. So small minority were actually able to close their deal flow quicker than usual because of the pressure coming from the outbreak. But for more than 50% of the studios, the impact was negative. When we have a look on the different studios from different platforms, we can see that about 27% of the mobile-only developers were reporting that their business is doing better than usual. This is explained mainly by the fact that for mobile games, the rush on the games coming from because of the outbreak, when people are playing more games every day, it has been much easier for them to monetize the increased amount of players, mainly because free-to-play business models and the other techniques and tools used in the mobile games industry were much more developed for quickly scaling up your business and monetizing the quick increase in the number of players. But still, 27% report that their business was doing worse than usual. So even if you work for mobile, the times are hard. For PC, only 18% of the developers reported their business is doing better than usual, and 41% reported that their business is doing worse than usual. This is, of course, coming from the fact that if you are operating a pay-per-download model, it's not as easy. And on a console side, where you are relying on deals from the big console publishers, only 6% of the developers were telling that their business was doing better than usual. We are having PC and console here because there are so few console-only developers in Europe that really there wasn't any meaning on analyzing those numbers, but we got replies from 53% of the 53 console and PC focused game developer studios. So there at least was some representation. Interestingly, regardless of the size of the business, there is about 30 to 40%, 30 to 50% of the studios that are facing negative impact. And understandably, bigger your business is, more there are companies reporting that their business is doing better than usual. One of the biggest surprise from our study was the impact on different regions. Not so surprisingly, in Southern Europe, where the countries that have had the worst COVID-19 outbreak in Europe, also the studios are struggling the most. 52% of the studios report that their situation is worse than usual, and 24% of the studios are afraid of being closed down within next 3 months. Of course, this is partly explained by the virus outbreak, but also these are countries where there hasn't been that many public support instruments, unlike in Northern Europe or Western and Central Western Europe. That has really helped developers in those countries. And also these developers from Southern Europe are more focused on PC than, for example, developers from Northern Europe that are mobile focused. So that is the next layer of negative impact on them. Interestingly, the worst impact would be seen from the Baltic countries. We got only replies on 5 studios, so you can make really big conclusions from there. But you can say that Baltic countries are the ones that with the least developed local games industry ecosystems, and they don't really have any kind of support instruments existing from the public side at the moment. So those studios are really struggling. But the most positive reports we were receiving the most positive feedback from the Eastern Europe. This might be just because of the fact that developers from the Eastern Europe they know how to get through the difficult times. They have the really positive attitude towards sciences. So it might be a cultural topic. But in those countries, also the runway of the studios is usually a lot longer because the burn rate is small. If you are operating in Southern Europe, let's say in Lisbon, for example, those housing costs are skyrocketing for years because of the tourism boom. So it's really, really difficult to actually survive as a game developer studio with small income. But if you are living in Bucharest, that's much easier. And also Eastern Europe has a number of big global game publishers and developers like EA, Ubisoft. They have their studios in Romania, for example. So there is lots of outsourcing deals available, and they have the outsourcing culture as well. So that might explain that. So to sum it up, the situation where we are at the moment, the barriers for accessing to funding are increasing as the P2P events are cancelled. And this has a significant impact on the deal flow of the game developer studios. That was the reason why ECDF organized, together with Reboot and RCP, European Games BizDev Catering, as an emergency measure supporting European industry. And the national trade associations are introducing guidance documents on how to access public emergency funding. And we are hoping that the public administration is going to be more flexible on the bureaucratic side, on the hard times, and especially if they have given any kind of support for trade missions that are now cancelled, they wouldn't be asking that money back from the associations or from companies. Unfortunately, there are some countries, some local authorities who are not following these ideas and are now asking the money back. And that is, of course, in this difficult situation, causing even more challenges for the studios. Then there are more and more barriers to access the talent, and this is related to online question I received from Daniel. At the moment, the percentage of the international game industry workers, meaning I suppose people coming from outside Finland, if I remember correctly, it's almost 30%, definitely more than 25%. So it's somewhere between 25 to 30%. So it's quite big. Finland is not the only country where the local games industry ecosystems are relying on accessing the global top talent on the games. And of course, now the recruitment processes have been completely stopped. And this is a big problem for studios that would need to have access to talent. And on the GDF side, together with the Bavarian Game Developer Association, we introduced this kind of emergency matchmaking tool for outsourcing parts of game development. If you do not have talent, at least you would be able to find some other studios that would be ready to outsource some of their resources for you, so that you could be able to scale up your business now that you have more users and more players. A number of studios have reported that efficiency of game development has gone down because of remote working. That hopefully is better now, because people are now have established tools for that. So data from March doesn't really reflect situation now, but there is a clear trend at the moment to do more and more things remotely. It's easy in the industry, and more studios are operating like this. Even in the big studios, there are some things that you really cannot do remotely. Like if you have a motion capture studio, of course those people have to work locally on site, but everyone else in countries like Finland are working remotely at the moment. So instead of closing companies, they work remotely. It's easy in games industry. As an answer to Jason's question. But the games industry side, the game developer studios themselves aren't the part that has faced the most critical and worst effect of the outbreak. The games industry events, startup incubators and accelerators, brick-and-mortar video game stores, esport venues and arenas, as well as VR arcades, are the ones that are really, really struggling at the moment. We all have used to this kind of news lately from the games industry events. This is from Games Week Berlin, but this example could be any other games industry event at the moment. In March, beginning of the March, they were telling that and estimating that there was no plans to cancel the Games Week Berlin. And unfortunately, I suppose that was true, because only in 2 weeks they were forced to tell that they have to cancel the Games Week Berlin. And of course, for event organizers, if you don't have a backup plan, this is a really, really, really challenging situation. So their next plan was to combine Games Week Berlin with EGX in October. So that plan lasted until May 2020, when they were forced to cancel that plan. And now they are again figuring out what to do. So all the best luck and strength for our colleagues on the event side. It's really very challenging times at the moment, and things are changing quickly. But that's also, this kind of outbreak means that there is a disruption going on at the moment in the games industry event side. If we start from the P2C side, some of the big P2C events are still going to be organized. China Joy reports that they will go on as usual, but it will be interesting to see what kind of impact it will have, and will be more or less a Chinese-only event. So if the Western participants cannot enter the Chinese event and see the trends and everything, so it's might be a beginning of a weak signal of this kind of regional clusterization of the games industry. But let's hope that that is not the case. And luckily, at least Gamescom is going to introduce more this kind of digital P2C events. So actually, we are seeing now some kind of trend that games industry events are actually entering the streaming business. That's going to change a number of things. Gamescom, for example, has a very interesting ideas how to use their significant industry presence and significant reach, or so to reach people online and become one of the major events on the earth where you can find new games, both from big publishers as well as from indie publishers. And for Europe, of course, this is great news. And let's see what happens. So there should be more news coming soon on the digital version of the Gamescom on P2C side. On conferences side, yeah, everyone is moving online at the moment. Nordic Game is a good example of this. They have introduced it now, Nordic Game Plus, an online version of Nordic Game Conference taking place in a few weeks. If you need a discount code for that, don't hesitate to contact me. But DevCom has a even more long-term plan. So they are not just introducing an event. They are building a full, some kind of track, series of speeches, videos, kind of what the GDC has been doing for years now with the GDC Vault. Really becoming this kind of source of information that only caters people once a year. And that will is a great, interesting weak signal about the future, where actually the conferences will be playing much more vital role in games education, especially on the non-formal side. And let's see what kind of role they will be taking. But of course, face-to-face events are likely to stay aboard. And hopefully we will also find still tools for trade missions that we can get game developers out from their local city level bubbles to meet other developers from other countries, exchange information, because there is nothing like the peer learning that happens in these events and conferences when you are able to talk with other people on the coffee breaks. And it's very hard for me to imagine that that would happen online. Of course, I might be just getting old and not really know, because on the hand, in games industry, there are lots of online sites that are used for years for learning. So interesting to see what happens. On B2B side, there's clearly emerging some kind of trend of more specialized deal-making events. The European Games Business Catering, that what we decided in the beginning, just to be really focused on something, do something well. We decided to focus only on the game developer studios and publishers and investors, and didn't have any third-party service providers there. So, yeah, more focused B2B events. That might be one way forward. In the Games Week Berlin, they are now even introducing this kind of dev booster that is kind of more tailored pitching process itself, more service for the investors, that you get better pitches, more hand-picked game developers and games and projects to focus on. That might be also a sign from the future where actually P2P side is not only a pitching event, a matchmaking event, but it's something a longer process where the studios who are competing with each other get pitching. But that's, of course, there would be more and more this kind of doorkeepers blocking to access. It's has good sides and bad sides. And interestingly, White Knights has now introduced this kind of P2C platform for matching service providers and game developer studios. So that might be one of the directions. But yeah, I'm also expecting on the P2P side that there will be P2P events in the future, but they will be matched with some kind of increasingly better online components. And if you are looking for what is really happening on event sites, have a look on the EGDF SDGA Slovak Game Developer Association list of the industry events. It's available, for example, on EGDF website. So, incubators and accelerators, these are on-site services usually. And if you have some extra money at the moment, please don't hesitate to support, for example, Digi Game Center in Jyväskylä, northern Finland or central Finland, who are really struggling because of the virus and the fact that they have been losing lots of the companies. Early stage startups going down is a big challenge for incubators and accelerators, depending on their income from the rents or something like that. So they are struggling, but at the same time, also see that startup accelerators and incubators are moving to virtual programs. And this might be, again, a quick sign of the future where instead of on-site accelerators, we will see even more on virtual accelerators and incubators in games industry. And that's, of course, good for the reaching the critical mass of the studios. But on the other hand, if you're a local developer, you might be really enjoying this kind of local community and need this kind of face-to-face support every day. So they have both sides. On the brick-and-mortar video game store side, first of all, you have to remember that those retail stores were going down already way before COVID-19 outbreak. In December 2019, before any news from the outbreak, we were reading news where GameStop was telling that they are going to close down their business in Northern Europe. In March 2020, because of the outbreak, they were closing down all their stores, at least in the United States. Their online sales are booming. Well, you have to get the devices from somewhere, and there is still people who want the collector items or something like that. So there is place for online side of the games retail, but this kind of brick and mortar video game stores, this might be it. But let's see what happens. The arcades, they are also struggling at the moment. We didn't really see any kind of big boom of them in Europe. There was first VR bubble already some years ago in China. So this is clearly something that we have been lagging behind, and unfortunately it looks like that because of the outbreak we are lacking for years to come behind China. On the positive side, now the virtual reality arcades are using their computing power to actually solve the COVID-19 outbreak for all of us. So hopefully they were successful, and we will be getting some kind of solution for COVID-19 therapies as soon as possible. Esport venues and arenas, these are also big thing in Asia, but they were also planned in Europe as well. NetEase, for example, at least was releasing plans to invest more than $700 million on esports stadium in August 2019. And now, at least the smaller players in China are struggling. The same in Europe. If you have any kind of esports venue, it's really, really tough times for you. On the other hand, at the same time on esports, that's the only sports existing. So there is more room for everyone at the moment because you're not competing against traditional sports. But interestingly, it also means that this kind of traditional sport players like Formula 1 are now entering the esports. And that's going to change a number of things because, of course, it makes the market bigger, but at the same time, they are enormous organizations with enormous resources. So it will be quite a challenge for esports or focused companies from the games industry side. Interesting times. So, a roadmap to the new normal. Nobody really knows. We are at the moment quite blinded. Some of us are more optimistic. Some of us are more pessimistic about the future. But already now, we can say that the worst is only ahead of us. As I was telling before, most of the studios have a runway for less than a year, about 6 months or something like that. It means that they have been able to survive. We made our survey in March, so they had a runway at least until June, September, something like that. So in the autumn 2020, we are going to really start to see the impact of the outbreak because the delayed deals and everything. We will see many bankruptcies in the games industry as well. And a number of studios going through extremely difficult times. And also, if the big studios not have access to talent, there is going to be also this kind of problems on actually scaling up your business. And it's clear that the big studios with already successful games have been the biggest winners of the game sales boom caused by the outbreak. And it's clear that if we want to keep the games industry SME ecosystem in the game developers existing, we need more long-term public support measures for games industry in Europe. First of all, we need safety nets for bankruptcies. Because of this, it would be extremely important that we would be using soft loans, meaning loans that can be transferred to become grants if you are not able to pay them back. We have to allow personal bankruptcies in all European countries. And we have to start transforming incubators to incubators. So if incubators help you to build up your business, we need similar service also to closing down your business. If you have been watching everyone who is going through a bankruptcy, you know that it's extremely difficult process, extremely burdensome process, and usually you are really, really feeling the awful mental load of the bankruptcy, and you need support on that. So having some kind of incubators helping you through that process with the minimum damage for yourself or your family or something like that, that would be perfect. Increasing financial investment for trade missions. So when the events start to happen again, it's important that the European studios are able to join them. It's important that we are able to really develop model for digital trade missions and how the pitching actually works in this kind of online environment. And in order to kickstart games industry startup boom through public funding, we need more public seed funding. At the moment, European industry was really relying on this venture capital funding from United States, China, mainly outside Europe. perhaps in Sweden, you have really had your own venture capital ecosystem, kind of in Finland. But still, lots of the risk money was coming from abroad. Now it doesn't exist. As a friend of mine was kind of saying angels have died. Of course, that's not true. The angel investors are just taking a break now, seeing where the things are going. But it's clear that there's less money available now, and it's important that in times like this, the public sector steps in. And yeah, remote working practices are here to stay, and it's going to be introducing significant administrative challenges if employees of your company are located in different countries, because different countries have different mandatory regulatory requirements for if you hire people, tax reporting and everything. So HR departments are now facing big challenges unless they are able to relocate the people to the main offices. Let's see what happens. The industry event calendar, the events, so I was really describing, is changing, and you are going to combine in your early routines more this kind of online and on-site presence. And sometimes, I think in the future, it will be the reality that it will be somehow mixed. Or you will have both on-site and online presence on major events, as it is on the B2B side. And games industry was one of the first to close down its doors and move to remote working. And at the moment, based on this kind of early stage feedback we are receiving, at least in Finland, will be one of the last ones to actually open up. We can work remotely. And there is increasingly more and more online services available, so there is no rush. So let's see what happens. But it's clear that most difficult times are ahead of us, and I wish good luck for everyone, strength and optimism, because usually after the rain, the sun is going to shine and good times will be ahead of us on the long run. And luckily, we are working for the games industry and working in the games industry that has always been one of the pioneers, the trendsetters of the showing the example for other industries. And also we have existing digital distribution channels. So it's possible for us to actually do business online. And now when there's bigger demand for games than ever before, there is also more opportunities to do business. And this kind of disruptions happens in the games industry once in a decade. So it also means lots of new opportunities. So good luck. And I'm happy to reply to questions, if any. Perhaps I will quickly comment Jason's comment about need for incubators, that you need incubators in games industry, especially for indie game developers. I completely agree that this kind of support instruments and measures are needed. But the good question is, do they necessarily have to be on-site incubators? On the other hand, the local communities that have been built around this kind of incubators and this kind of non-formal knowledge sharing has really brought significant positive impact on the people participating in this kind of programs. So there's that side. On the other hand, especially on indie side, you are able to match, reach more this kind of people interested in similar projects like you. And we have the long tradition, like game mods already back in the days. They were completely online projects. And there is increasingly virtual game jams being organized. There are lots of this kind of signals that you can actually cooperate and do things also online. And we have a long tradition of doing things only online. So yeah, in the end, I suppose both sides will be continuing to exist, and you will find place for both. You need community places for game developers in locally. For example, the community and the success of the success of the Finnish games industry is completely based on communities. On having space like Arcade 5 in Helsinki helps a lot to actually have a place to unite the community, organize events for the community. So let's see what happens. Any other questions? If not, I'm more than happy to give the virtual floor to the next speaker. So thank you, Santeri, for inviting me on. Good luck, everyone.